Welcome. This podcast is an exploration into being human and what's possible when there's less attention on the noise in our heads. Warning. While listening to this broadcast, you may experience moments of deep peace, sighs of relief, personal insights, or long stretches of dead air. Do not be afraid. This is normal. Under the Noise with Wyn Morgan and Kate Roberts.
Welcome to Under the Noise. I'm Kate Roberts, and I'm here with my co-host, Wyn Morgan. Hi, Wyn.
Hello, Kate.
How are you?
I'm well, if under the weather as well as under the noise.
And today we have as our guest, Siobhán. Hey, Siobhán.
Hi, both of you.
How are you?
I'm very well. Yes, over the weather, one may say.
Cool.
So, Siobhán, I know you've heard the show before, so you probably can't anticipate the question that's coming to you now, but we love to ask guests what they would love for our audience to know about them right now.
So I love the show. I was just telling both of you how much I really enjoy. The synergy between you both, I just think is kind of magical and rare. And a lot of people maybe try and force it with co-hosts, but you two just like comes very naturally. And I just love listening to you. So big fan. So I was anticipating the question. And then I thought, so my brain went, well, what do you want people to know? What a great opportunities. You could tell them anything. And then I thought I'll just wait and see what happens on the day. So I'd like them to know two things about me. One is for the benefit of you two, which is that me, Wyn and Kate, we've actually had dinner together many times, but you didn't know it. But I love to have dinner and watch the show on YouTube. And it's been really lovely. So thank you for being my dinner partners for all this time. And the other thing I would love people to know is my brain rather freaks out so much, like maybe every day. And I call them like these automatic negative thoughts, like ants in your pants. And what I mean by that is that my brain goes to catastrophizing, panic, and doom all the time. And the reason I want people to know about me is because I work with people to find something new and find freedom around overthinking and overwhelm, stress and anxiety, so that they can live life with more peace and ease and calm. And I freak out all the time. And so why I think it's important for people to know that is because there's like this misunderstanding that if we're wanting a nicer experience of life or making progress, whatever that means to someone, that we don't have negative thoughts, or we don't have a ton of chatter, we don't have our brain going to the worst case scenario all the time. And that just isn't true in my experience and for the experience of many people that I've worked with. But what's awesome about that is that when you kind of know that and see that that's just what happens, and that's just our brains being brains, like that's just given me so much freedom. Like, of course, something happens. Like just yesterday, it was the stupidest thing, is that my the cat food was being delivered, it comes every 6 weeks, so it was expected. But someone knocks on the door. Someone barely knocks on the door in this area. And I was like, oh my God, it's the police. It must be the police telling me that my dad's had an accident, who lives in the UK. That was my first thought, right, when someone knocks on the door. Now that one went away like almost immediately. And then some of them stick around a bit longer. But almost all the time, the first response of my brain to anything is doom or catastrophe or something. But when we see that that is what happens, and that's just what brains do, and maybe some are a bit more prone to others, and that's okay, like it doesn't have the same meaning anymore. It's like, duh. And sometimes it can be quite funny as well. So I just would love people to know about me. Like, yes, I work with people around overthinking, overwhelm, and worry to live life with more peace and ease. And I freak out every day, right? But I don't kind of freak out. But I have a freaky out thought. But what's happened over time is my relationship to them is just transformed. So I would love for people to maybe know that about me, but then see where that happens in their own life, so that if they are maybe exploring the type of conversation that you guys do in your work and that we'll have today, but they're like, but I'm still getting these thoughts about, pick your favorite topic here, mine is everything. Oh, it's not working, I'm not seeing anything, rah, rah, rah. Like, that's just not the case. Like, this is how it goes. So I hope that answers your question. Like, would you mind if I asked you both, like, what was the last thing that you had, like a doom thought or a catastrophizing thought about? Yes, when?
Yeah, well, I have COVID. And this morning, I hadn't slept well because I'm really struggling with it. It's aching me, but I'm finding it at the same time a little bit humorous. But then this morning, and I didn't have to get up early, didn't have to get up till about 10 o'clock, but as I said, I hadn't slept. And I noticed my breathing was labored. And I went, oh, I need to phone an ambulance. I'm going to die tomorrow. I went there.
Yeah.
Okay. So doesn't get much better than that, does it? As a freak out. Oh, I'm going to die tomorrow.
Well, you could have died today. Like, tomorrow, at least you got a bit of time.
Yeah, because we wouldn't have had a chance to do this. So you're right. It's better than today.
Yeah, I so get that. What about you, Kate? Could you remember the last time your brain went there?
Over the weekend, my partner, one of his good friends, his house burnt down, caught fire while they were all in it, sleeping, and everyone's okay. But they lost, their home and everything in it. And yeah, I had thoughts about what that would be like. Past the, is everybody okay? Those kind of questions. But then I realized, I'm like, wow, what would that even be like to lose everything? And I kind of, obviously by choice, I'm going there. I'm thinking about it. And so, yeah, that was probably the most recent that just happened. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, that's always like when you hear ambulances or, something like that, you kind of like, where are all my loved ones? You're thinking about, the people that you care about. And that's pretty common for me. Yeah. I definitely am not immune to basically taking tragedy and figuring out how that applies to me in some way.
Yeah.
Completely selfish. Yeah. And, but yeah, I think about what it would be like if I went through those experiences. Yeah.
Yeah. And isn't that kind of funny when we look at it? Like, that's a very difficult thing to have happen, like for a house to burn down. I remember when I was little, that was one of my fears, actually. It happened to a friend of ours, and I remember for maybe 4 or 5 years I had a bag packed. I was only small, so I think it had like I don't know, my favorite socks and a teddy bear in, nothing useful, but I would take it everywhere with me in case something happened and we had to leave the house very suddenly. So fire, yeah, definitely a big one. But what I found interesting about what you said and what we all do is that someone somewhere is having a hard time because of these sirens or whatever's going on. And yet we go there rather than go away from there. It's like we choose, although it's not really a choice, but we go to the tragedy, to the challenge, to the hardship, and we put ourselves there. It's like, and it doesn't make sense in a way that we do that. But yeah, well, I'm so glad that no one was hurt.
Yeah, me too. And I love what you said about, when you were introducing yourself, about this is what I do, and this is also what I do, which I love, because, while we can tell all these stories about ourselves, and maybe even some people give themselves a hard time for being human and all the things that go with being human, it actually makes us a freaking expert on what that's like. Yeah. Which might be our greatest gift in helping people.
Yeah, I love that you said that. And I think things are changing now, but certainly in my lifetime, anyone who is in any kind of helping profession maybe would have gone to school and learned a ton of theory and maybe done some work experience or whatever, but to really know how it feels to have the experience of the thing that you want to help the other person with, like there's nothing like that at all. And so it's funny, like, to think that there's lots of, I think maybe brain surgery, I'd be okay to have a brain surgeon operate on me, even if they hadn't had brain surgery themselves, like but someone that's never, like, doesn't know how it feels to be filled with intense panic or overwhelm and try and think their way out of it, or have it make their lives very small, or make choices which they kind of know are bad for them, but they do it anyway. And just this constant swirl, which, on some level is not necessarily related to things in the outside world. And that's not even helpful. It's your mind, but that doesn't do anything for you. Like, so to have someone that's like, yes, I know exactly how that feels. And by the way, I had a snatch of that 2 days ago, right? Like, I just think that that's been helpful. That's definitely how I've seen more around this kind of stuff, is by connecting with people that are like, yes, me too. I so get that. Yeah.
I think that's vital in normalizing the human experience, as opposed to something to transcend or never have a negative thought again, because that's just not on offer.
Yes.
From what I've seen anyway, it's just not on offer.
Yeah. Yeah, you're so right. And yet there's so much out there that's like, oh, hey, rewire your brain and remove negative thoughts for $99 a month forever, and there is a lot of like conflicting messages out there. So when you're maybe trying to find some help, it's like, what? So these people are telling me, oh, I can rewire my brain, and all I need to do is like do these 95 different like points in a morning routine, and everything's going to be great, and keep that up for the rest of my life, and I'll be fine. And these people are like, oh, no, it's fine. You can just have your human experience and live a nicer life. And that doesn't seem like it's available either. So yeah, I think the more that I like to say, revel in our inescapable humanness, because it's not going anywhere, and see what we see more around that, like see, well, what even is this? And what is these thoughts and feelings coming and going? And like, why are things changing? And just taking a look gently and without judgment as best we can around like how it's all working, and seeing more around that rather than trying to fix a thing that looks like a problem. That's just been enormous in my life, and enormous in the conversations that I have with people, because like it's not going away. And I love, you've had some amazing guests on the show which have said this too, like people that have been exploring this kind of conversation for decades, and they're still freaking out. But the freak out doesn't mean the same thing. Like, it's not this stinging, all-encompassing, engulfing freak out that we've all experienced. It's like, I don't know, there's a space there, which the more we see around that, the less it is painful.
Well, something you said a few minutes ago, Siobhán, was that my relationship to this has changed. And you said that in your introduction, and I think that was just a lovely thing to recognize as well, is that I've noticed that for me is that my relationship with how nuts I am is just like, oh, that's just me being human, not Wyn being mental.
Yeah.
Not Wyn being bipolar. That's just, he happens to have moods. Oh, what's mood? Oh, me taking thought seriously. Oh, that's it? Yeah. And when I'm in a lower mood, it'll look more real. That's it? Yeah. Oh, geez. And that's not a Wyn thing, that's a human thing.
Mm.
It's such a relief. Well, it was for me anyway. When I saw that, I saw my wellness. Then I saw I was healthy, not what everyone else was telling me.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you. And having a different relationship with our inescapable human experience, it transforms everything. Like, it really does. Like, just like you described just then, Wyn, seeing the same things happening, right? Having a low mood, still the same thing, but everything is different about how that feels and what you may do with it. And what I love as well is that we don't change our relationship. Like, you don't like buy a book on like how to change your relationship with your human experience by following these 10 steps. The relationship changes like naturally on its own, the more we kind of see around what's actually happening. And for people who have spent decades sometimes pursuing the thing they need, or the whole cache of things that they need to be doing in order to feel better or be better or do better, always better, tools, techniques, strategies, for them to see, oh, you don't need to do anything. I may say, oh, hey, the good shit lies in changing your relationship to your thoughts and feelings, but that's not up to you. You can just relax. Like, and I think some people, and me too, have a hard time with that. Well, how do I relax then? How do I not do anything? How do I not change my relationship? How do I let this happen? And that's human too.
So what do you say when someone says that to you?
Like the how do I?
Mm-hmm.
How? Yeah. So the clue is in the how, to me, I think. Like when you hear a how, you're like, oh, yeah, that's a brain being a brain, wanting to figure out the things. And I do it all the time. How then? How this? How that? Because in the how, there's a doing. Like the how is the question vehicle to the doing. And what we're kind of saying is, there's nothing to do. So they're already at odds with each other. So, and this is kind of maybe the most interesting but frustrating part of the kinds of conversations we have for other people, maybe sometimes for me. Like, well, there is no how. And even if there is a how, and here's where the words start to get woefully inadequate, like the how, maybe the more you see and the more you kind of explore gently without expecting to find something in particular, the how kind of comes off the table. Like the how's taken away. Like, we don't need the how. It becomes irrelevant. But try saying that to someone that's like, what? Like same for me again. And that's why, speaking to what Kate was saying before about having us have gone through the things that we try and help clients or groups or people with generally, it's like, yeah, I know how that feels when I have a how question and someone's like, well, it's not really about the how, and the how will get off the table. I'm like, just tell me. And that's so fine. And what's cool about that is that the how questions seem very compelling in a sped up mind. And we know, and we see more around when our mind settles down, the hows kind of go with it. It's like we drain out our thoughts or something. And the hows like disappear off and swirl down the drain too. And we're left with something where a how isn't there anymore. And I guess, well, my experience was I just had to see that like approximately 78 zillion times for myself before I could be like, oh, okay. So even if I can hear my own house bubbling up, I like, no, I don't need to do anything with them right there. But I had to see that a lot for myself. Like just what you were saying, Wyn, when you decided that you were going to maybe die tomorrow. I hope you don't, by the way. That would be a shame. Like when your mind settles, and of course something like COVID is going to make us even more maybe speedy in our mind, but you probably will not have the same thoughts either. And just seeing more around a mind settling on its own. And again, we don't have to do this. Oh, it's just kind of amazing. Like how did we get this friggin' awesome thing, like the infinite power of this thought thing, right? This amazing phenomena that you can do anything with, anything, literally anything. And then we get our feelings to let us know, like, hold on, wait, I'm kind of misusing that one a bit there. Letting us know instantly if we're like misusing this cool tool. And then it drains out on its own anyway. Like, so even if you are misusing it and then you're like, well, how do I stop? Well, you don't have to do anything. It's all going to drain away and your mind will settle on its own. Like, how awesome is that? And it's just incredible to show people this. Like, hey, look at that. Isn't that so cool? And if they're like me, they'll need to see it a ton of times and then they'll try and find the science for it and then they'll want data and then they'll want everything else. And then they will get quiet. I remember one of my first like boom insights. Of course, it wasn't one of my first insights because I've been having them for over 30 years. But the first one I noticed is like, was like, oh, my mind has settled down on its own. Like I still have all these problems, right? But I feel better. Now that is very, very curious to me. How did that happen if my feelings are caused by my circumstances and my problems? And yet I feel not necessarily better, but certainly less shit than what I did earlier, but nothing has changed in the outside world. Like that just blew my mind. Like not just blew my mind in the sheer usefulness and loveliness of that in itself, but also opening me up to the fact of insight and fresh thought and noticing a new thing. And like, that was just awesome. So that's why I love to like have conversations like this and point people to that. And yeah, gosh, it's just so wonderful when we can just see a tiny bit of that ourselves, just a tiny bit, and then it all comes open.
I love what you said about that space that's created. Because for the people that, you know, like you and like me, who sensed that there was something really true in this conversation. And we're very used to asking how, all the hows, that's where I feel like that's where so many of us start. But for those people, just staying in the conversation allows for that space. And it's not just a relationship with our negative thought. But like you said, before we started recording, the first time, like when you started like listening to the podcast and that space just kind of ramped things up and tightened up and I don't like that space, like kind of that initial, it's kind of like all the hows, all the busyness, the weight of it. But like staying in the conversation, now there's a different relationship with that quiet that there's no how. Like your relationship with quiet is different and you didn't do anything for that other than stay. Just stay.
I think what's coming to mind just as you were talking then, Kate, about the how thing, was that we use the how because I think, as I said before, the how is the vehicle to doing. So we ask, how do we do a thing? And why do we want to do something anyway? We want to do the thing because we want to change something. So if someone says, well, how do I get my mind to quiet? Because they want to be in the quiet mind, because not being in the quiet mind is bad in some way. And I'm just kind of simplifying. So what was kind of coming to me then is, as you were describing that example, is the how fades away or comes off the table because the thing that we wanted the how for, which was to do something to get away from the thing we didn't want, the thing we didn't want changes on its own. So it doesn't become a thing that we don't want anymore. So it doesn't need a how to change it, kind of thing. Like I did warn you both before we started, didn't I, that the words were rubbish, but like it melts away. So rather than living in a world where we're taught implicitly and otherwise to do stuff and get stuff done, to have a result of any kind, are steps. And one thing leads to another and they build on each other until you get the thing you want. But in this kind of conversation, those things change. They look different. They fade away, like melt away. So we no longer need the how to do the doing bit to get to the thing, because the thing, like let's say the wanting a quiet mind, looks different, because although yes, it's lovely to have a quiet mind, we also see that we don't necessarily need to get there, because being in a sped up mind has a different feel to it in the first place. On a scale of 1 to 10, how much sense did that make to you, Kate?
Complete. But at the same time, what's cool is I read a quote recently that I had seen plenty of times, but it really kind of settled into a different space. And I always mutilate quotes, so it's not really a quote. But I was reading Byron Katie, and she says, you can't have all of the things that you want because you already are all of those things. So it's like our search for them and wanting to have them covers up the fact that we already are the quiet. And that's, I think, what we settle into is not the how or the have or the get to it and find it and seek it. It's just that we drop into who we are. And I love that.
Yeah, there's no doing there. How do I do being who I really am? Like, yeah.
And you just became the physical embodiment of what we're talking about.
That's how it's done.
The example that I often hear is when someone says, yeah, but how do I let go of a thought? You don't have to do that. It does it itself. If it's true that thought changes, you don't have to make it change.
Mm.
And it's the same thing with this, right? When we just like fall into a quieter mind, because that's what always exists when we're not innocently stirring it up.
Yeah, that's a good one, because anything that we do to let go of a thought is, of course, just exacerbating it and adding more thought anyway. Yeah. Which seems kind of obvious when you say it like that, but
It's not, though.
yeah,
At the moment,
yeah,
it isn't, right?
exactly. Yeah, like how funny that the thing that we have to figure all this out or whatever is thought, which is the thing that we're trying to see differently or calm down or whatever. Like it's it's like and that's why it's like I had a brush with this kind of conversation many years ago. And a seed was definitely planted because it flourished like a bamboo tree a couple of years later, in that way that apparently bamboo grows for a long time under the soil and then it's like, and like grows in about 2 meters in 10 seconds or something like that. So that was kind of me. But my first brush up against this stuff, I was definitely trying to logic and like reason and make it all make sense in my mind, which is kind of common, I see. So I, just to what you said then, when I'd be like, what? So I need to let go of thought, but I can't do that with my thoughts. That thoughts are the only things I have. And now I'm thinking again, well, how do I stop overthinking? Am I doing it now? Like I couldn't make sense of it. And of course we talk about how it's beyond that. And it's not about that. And I'm like, what's that then? What do you even mean? Like, so it's no wonder that we can kind of get ourselves in a little bit of a twist. And that's why it's so in the feeling and the sensing and the things that we can't put to words. Like sometimes when I'm in the loveliest of moods, I think it's just hilarious. Like, God, this is so funny, isn't it? Like we're all trying to explain something which is unexplainable, and I'm that's my career. Great. It's like all my job is like to explain things which can't be explained, and you just got to feel them, but you can't try and feel them because then you won't feel them. Like what?
Yeah, but you're talking to people who know this at some level. And maybe we're talking to the part of them that knows this to be true. And that's why when we don't have the words, the right words, that's maybe even better, I think, to some extent, because we don't rely on them. And we're not constantly pulling from what we know. We get to sit in a space where we don't have the words, but we're talking to something that at some level they get, because it's how we're made.
Isn't that amazing, though? And to know that there is absolutely no exception to that at all. Like, it's just the most wonderful guarantee. Like, every single person is made exactly in the way that we're inadequately describing, but every single person, like, that is astonishingly helpful. And I love knowing that. Like, I love like I trained as a coach in kind of old paradigm thought work stuff before I came across this type of thing. And I remember like really dreading, I hate to say it this way now, but like dreading some of my clients. I'm like, they're beyond help. I can't help them. Like, my thing at the time was procrastination, which is hilarious because Wyn and I actually had a conversation about that a while ago. But I was like, this person, they're beyond help. I can't help them. Nope, I just can't do it. And it's just so funny now to just know without any doubt at all, that we are all made in the same way, this way which is endlessly kind and helpful and helps us to thrive and be at peace and calm. Always there. And the only thing in the way of that is just a few little made up things that we made along the way, like just a few little social constructs here and there, a few evolutionary legacy things from our brains, just a few little things that when you kind of see that, it just comes down, and sometimes very quickly and sometimes over a long time, which was me. And it's just astonishing to know that that's always there. And like you say, Kate, it doesn't need the words because there's something else.
Yeah.
Oh, I just love it. So,
Yeah.
Cat interrupted my peaceful moment, sticking its claws into my bottom.
Well, that's quite profound in itself as to what can happen to us, right? Mental claws.
Siobhán, thank you so much for being with us here.
Honestly, freaking joy.
I think this is the longest span of time zones we've had so far.
Oh, really?
Yeah. We've got a 17-hour time zone span between Kate in Florida and you in Wellington, New Zealand. So, and if we were recording next week, it would have been an 18-hour one.
Wow.
And the time changes in the US and Canada this weekend. So.
That reminds me of like the more I'm in this conversation, as you say, Kate, like if you're in the conversation, you can't help but seeing something, right? And that's not necessarily up to you. But what I've really noticed more about myself is this maybe word doesn't sound as peaceful and nice, but the destabilizing, that's fine. The destabilizing of so many things which looked so real and now are up for grabs. So I wouldn't say necessarily they're not real. It's almost like a choice to reimagine what they maybe mean to me. And just a funny thing that I love to poke around in and be like, what even is that? Is like time and time zones and the things we make up. And I was reminded of the other day. Well, I mentioned to you both that I was feeling really unwell last week. I just had a head cold, and it's the middle of spring here in New Zealand where I live. It's like the opposite in the southern hemisphere. And I mentioned to my dad, who lives in the UK, oh, I've got a head cold. I don't feel very well. He's like, oh, well, it's the time of year for it, autumn. All the kids going back to school. I was like, well, it's spring here, Dad. He's like, yeah, but it's still October though, isn't it? And there was just something about that I was like, it's all frigging made up. Like, I'm not saying that there aren't seasons. It's just the way that we relate to them and assign things to things. Like, what's the time of year for it? What, autumn or October? Like, why? just kind of made me laugh. And I see that everywhere. I see that with just kind of anything. And of course, my mind's gone completely blank, so I can't come up with a really profound example right now. But just in the stuff that we've made up around how we work, how we spend our leisure time, how we spend our money, milestones in our life. Like, this is a really big one to me. People should follow these certain paths within careers, like what? And they're all made up stuff anyway. Oh, I don't know. I just love, what I've loved is the loosening of not ideas held tightly, because I didn't really know they were ideas. I thought it was just the world, but seeing them as ideas, and the softening and loosening around that is such an interesting place to play, and somewhere that a good few years ago I thought I couldn't relax there because I needed to have things figured out. So if you don't need to work in this way, then how do you need to work? And if you don't spend your leisure time in this way, and if you don't have a minimum of 2 hobbies and one must be a language, well, what do you need then? Like, and if you're not married by 37, then what does that mean about you? So I guess what I'm saying is, like, it's so lovely to see all these made up things for what they are, which is made up, but then not have to figure out the alternatives, because that's all changing too. Like, I don't know, it feels to me what would have felt very frightening, like, well, what's true and what's real, and what should I be doing and what should the world be doing? Like, to not have that and to have it all up for grabs and to play with and poke at and wonder about or ignore feels so awesome and lovely and freeing. And I would love for people to maybe see that as a fun, expansive place to be, rather than somewhere which feels very untethered, which is my old view on that. Like, oh, because in your curiosity and in your open-mindedness is where the tether is to me. Like, I don't know if that's kind of making sense, but as I'm saying it, I just feel, like, all good. They say that in New Zealand, all good, bro. Maybe that can be like my final word on the show to make it sound really profound, like, all good.
Well, it saved us needing to ask you that question anyway at the end, so that's something cool. One less thing for us to do. Thank you, Siobhán.
Thank you, Wyn and Kate. Thank you so much. It's been amazing to be on Under the Noise.
The one thing I want to say as well, if you've not seen any of Siobhán's stuff on Instagram, her reels are hilarious. So I would recommend, and there'll be details on how to get in touch with Siobhán wherever you found this podcast. And I would recommend it. It constantly makes me laugh whenever I see a new reel from you. So very entertaining and profound at the same time, which is also incredibly cool. So you've been listening to this week's Under the Noise with Kate Roberts and me, Wyn Morgan, and our special guest this week, Siobhán. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Kate and Wyn.
And if you've got any questions for us or for Siobhán, then please do get in touch. As I said just a few moments ago, our contact details are in the outro from Kate and also where you found this podcast. And we'll speak to you again very soon. Take care, everyone.
Thanks for joining us. We'd love for you to subscribe, rate, and review. If you have a topic or question that you'd like us to chat about, email Wyn or Kate at wyn@winning.co.uk and Kate at katerobertscoaching.com. Until then, enjoy what's possible under the noise.